Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she maneuvered her car through the narrow, winding roads leading up the mountains. The city felt like a distant memory, swallowed by the expanse of trees, cliffs, and endless sky. This was the escape she had desperately needed, a break from the emails, meetings, and never-ending grind of corporate life. She'd booked this week-long stay at a remote mountain lodge on a whim, hoping to find some clarity in the solitude of nature. As the GPS signal faded, the lodge came into view. It was a cozy wooden structure nestled at the base of the towering mountains, with smoke lazily drifting from the chimney. It looked like a scene from a postcard. Maya sighed in relief and pulled up to the gravel driveway, turning off the engine. She stepped out of the car and was instantly greeted by the cool, crisp air. It felt like a breath of fresh life, filling her lungs and calming her nerves. With her suitcase in hand, she headed for the front door. The lodge was even more charming up close, with its rustic wooden beams and stone accents. As she approached the door, it swung open, and she was greeted by the owner, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a deep, rugged charm. "Welcome to Silver Pines Lodge," he said with a smile that barely reached his eyes. His voice was low and gravelly, and he wiped his hands on the apron tied around his waist. Maya smiled back, feeling slightly caught off guard by his presence. "Thanks, I'm Maya, here for the week." "Ethan," he introduced himself, stepping aside to let her in. "I own the place. You'll have the guest cabin at the edge of the property. It's quiet, with a great view of the mountains." Maya glanced around the lodge, taking in the crackling fireplace and the large windows overlooking the forest. It was warm and inviting, much like the man standing before her. "Sounds perfect." As Ethan led her out to the cabin, she couldn't help but steal glances at him. He was ruggedly handsome, with scruffy dark hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the mountains themselves. His calm demeanor intrigued her. He wasn't like the men she was used to back in the city, so polished and driven. Ethan seemed at peace with the world around him, content to live at nature's pace. The cabin was exactly what she'd hoped for, simple yet cozy, with a small fireplace and a bed draped in soft woolen blankets. The window offered a breathtaking view of the mountains. She could already imagine spending hours watching the stars from that vantage point. "If you need anything, just let me know," Ethan said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. He stood by the door, watching her with those intense blue eyes. "Dinner's at 6 if you're interested." "I'll be there," Maya replied, feeling a flutter in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was from the mountain air or Ethan's steady gaze. That evening, Maya found herself seated at the large wooden table in the lodge's common room. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the space. Ethan was in the kitchen, preparing a meal. She could hear the clatter of pots and pans, along with the occasional hum of a tune she didn't recognize. As he brought out a steaming plate of roast chicken and vegetables, Maya felt a pang of guilt. She had expected to spend this week alone, with nothing but her thoughts and the mountains to keep her company. But now Ethan was there, and his quiet presence seemed to stir something inside her. "Do you live here year-round?" Maya asked as she took a bite of the food. It was delicious and hearty in a way that city restaurants could never replicate. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, been running this place for about 5 years now. It's quiet, but I like it." Maya leaned back in her chair, sipping the glass of red wine Ethan had poured for her. "It's beautiful here. I can see why you'd want to stay." He gave a small smile, but there was something deeper behind his eyes, something he wasn't saying. "What about you? Why'd you come all the way up here?" Maya hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "Just needed a break from the city. Life gets busy. It's hard to slow down sometimes." His words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. Maya felt the pull of something deeper than simple attraction, a connection that seemed to run beneath the surface, as steady as the mountains around them. The days passed in a slow, peaceful rhythm. Maya spent her mornings hiking the trails around the lodge, breathing in the fresh mountain air and letting the weight of the city melt away. Ethan often joined her, showing her hidden spots where the trees opened up to reveal stunning views of the valley below. They talked about everything and nothing: his quiet life in the mountains, her fast-paced world in the city, the things they'd both lost and found along the way. One afternoon, they hiked up to a cliff overlooking the valley. The sun was setting, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. They sat side by side, the silence between them comfortable and full of unspoken words. "This place has a way of making you feel small, doesn't it?" Maya said softly, gazing out at the endless expanse of trees and mountains. Ethan glanced at her, his blue eyes soft in the fading light. "Yeah, but in a good way. Makes you realize what really matters." Maya looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of his words. She had come here to escape, but now, sitting beside Ethan, she realized she had found something she hadn't been looking for. Something she didn't even know she needed. She turned to him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Ethan, But before she could finish, Ethan reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and steady. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured, his voice low and soothing. Maya felt the tension in her chest release, her heart settling into a steady rhythm. They sat like that for a long time, their hands intertwined as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the mountains into shadow. That night, back at the lodge, the tension between them had shifted. The air crackled with unspoken desire, and Maya couldn't help but steal glances at Ethan as they sat by the fire, sipping wine. His presence was magnetic, drawing her in with every quiet word and subtle smile. As the firelight flickered, casting shadows across the room, Maya felt a surge of boldness. She set her glass down and moved closer to Ethan, her heart racing as their eyes met. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Before she could say anything more, Ethan closed the distance between them, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was slow and tender, yet filled with a heat that sent shivers down her spine. Maya melted into him, her fingers tangling in his hair as the kiss deepened. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer as the world around them seemed to fade away. There was only the warmth of his body, the softness of his lips, and the electric connection that sparked between them. They moved together in perfect harmony, their bodies and hearts in sync as they explored the depths of their desire. The fire crackled softly in the background, the only sound in the otherwise silent lodge. When they finally pulled away, breathless and flushed, Maya rested her forehead against Ethan's, her heart pounding in her chest. "I didn't plan for this," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled, his blue eyes soft and filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Neither did I, but maybe that's the best part."